Rainbow Family Life Stories by Jodey Bateman. Interviews with Rainbow Family of Living Light folks conducted between 1977 and 2008. Scanned in 2018. Jodey Bateman may be contacted on Facebook. 12.A.Moonstone, Rebuild the Waste Places. Interviewed in 1979 in Arizona. Moonstone is one of the people who were central to setting up Flowering Tree. She lives with Michael Buffalo, a Vietnam vet, who brought food and medical supplies into the besieged American Indian Movement camp at Wounded Knee, South Dakota, in January 1973. She gives the fullest account of the Desert House incident that made Phil Coyote consider suicide. Moonstone. I was born in Chicago in 1946. My mother was a very creative woman who studied piano at the Chicago Conservatory and also painting. She was a very cultured lady who came from a family that made a lot in the stock market and lost all their money in the Depression, and she still has a better-than-thou attitude toward many people. My father was one of 11 kids, born in Georgia. His parents came to Chicago. When they died, he was raised in a boys' home. He was a very gregarious person. He became a salesman. He was the district manager for 4 or 5 different companies. He traveled all the time. He died a couple of years ago. I think what killed him was eating restaurant food for 30 years, also sweets and liquor. Because he wasn't even 60 when he died. My father loved all kinds of music, a lot of classical. He had a lot of records. He really got into developing a lot of speakers and amplifiers. I feel lucky that I got exposed to a lot of good music. I played flute in the high school band. When I was 6, we moved from Chicago to Memphis, Tennessee, and lived there almost 3 years. When we lived in Memphis, I went to ballet school for 1 year. I really loved it. I think that was one of my happiest years. I never had training again until I was 19. We moved to Kansas City for 3 years. Then we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, for 8 years. I was in Atlanta when Lester Maddox was hitting people with baseball bats for trying to go to his restaurant. I wasn't involved in civil rights. I was just in high school. I went to 2 years of college in Atlanta. Then I got married when I was 19 to a guy who graduated from Georgia Tech. We moved from Atlanta to LA in '65. Moving out of the stagnant atmosphere of Atlanta to California was like walking out of a grave into a new life. I was amazed at how free people were. I applied to go to UCLA and became a dance major. I had this real affinity to dance. I had all my courses like history out of the way in Atlanta, so all I took at UCLA was things like lighting, makeup, choreography, music. So when people talk about college, I say if you've got the right teachers, it's fun. Dancing changed my life. 'Cause the way UCLA used to teach dancing was to base it on what was really deep inside of you, so your dancing would be an expression of yourself. So I started getting into who I was. Simultaneously, what was happening was my husband, who was an aerospace engineer for Douglas Aircraft, wanted to make $1 million by the time he was 30. So he worked all the time they could give him, and our relationship deteriorated into nothing. After about 4.5 years, I started going crazy because the dance was revealing the deepest part of me. And at this time, 1969, hippies, flower children, were getting all this publicity. I would see pictures of these hippies in their beautiful clothes, and I would say, yeah, right on. That's how I want to live. So I left with my suitcase full of nothing but leotards. I was moving in with my girlfriend. My husband offered to drive me, and I said, if you're running away from home, you don't get your father to drive you. I was a graduate student at UCLA. I taught dance. I met this guy who was a graduate in sociology. When he first came into my dance class, I felt my soul go out to him. He was the first person who ever told me, do what you feel. He taught me to consult the I Ching and to smoke grass, not just to space out on it. He was creative like me. He was a really beautiful person. He's still one of my best friends. I feel we were soul mates on one level in past lives for centuries. We lived together for 2 years. Then LA started getting really ugly to me. Driving to UCLA, it was all brown. Billboards really got to me like, look at me. Buy me. My friend got a job at Central Washington State in Ellensburg, Washington, in August 1970. It was a whole new world to me, like living on the earth for the first time since I was a kid barefoot in Memphis. We lived in a little house on a sheep farm. I used to dance outdoors stoned in Washington all the time, which was totally different from the way I danced at UCLA. I started really relating to nature again. The college was real open to me coming and teaching, but I didn't want to teach in academia because I didn't want to give grades. After living there for a year, the dance school asked me to do a concert. I hadn't really worked on dance for 2 years. I didn't have the discipline. So all I would do was go sit by the creek and meditate and pray that a dance would come to me. The day came. The people who were writing the program for the concert asked me the name of my dance. I said, "Oh, I guess it's called Story." About a week before the concert, this dance came to me. I know it came from the earth and the Great Spirit with no music but the sound of my voice. I did it at the concert and for several other audiences. It was a special dance to me. I went down to UCLA and did it for a sociology class. Every time I did this dance, I learned something from it because it didn't come from me. I tried to get a dance studio together because I didn't like teaching at the college, because I think dance should be in a temple, a consecrated place. I found a studio in the backstage of a hippie restaurant. Then I moved to Wyoming. I went to visit a friend at Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I heard that Jackson Hole had 3 summer stock theaters that nobody used in the winter. There was a woman there who taught dance, and I got some other partners, the bank president's wife and a ski bum. We taught dance. In 2 of the theaters that weren't used in the winter, we gave 2 concerts a year. We got a grant from the National Endowment of the Arts, and we could buy costumes. We had all this money to play with. It was fun, but it was very limiting. It was a small community, and I was the dance teacher. That's all I was. At the end of 2 years, I got pregnant and consulted this astrologer. She said, on one particular day, good karma would be released. That was the day of our dance concert. It was like the end of a cycle. My desire to teach dance in a small town was fulfilled, and it was gone. It was over, and that was good. So I decided I'd have an abortion. I went to Washington to have an abortion. I never realized I wanted to have kids until. So I was really confused. Then that summer, 1974, I went to the Rainbow Gathering in Utah. After being in Wyoming where everybody was so conservative, there was all these naked hippies around, and I went, my people. I took off my clothes. One of the first people I met was Bear, and he painted my face. That's when I first saw Michael at a spaghetti dinner for 3,000. He had a puppy dog cradled in one arm and dog food in one hand. At that gathering, I really wanted everybody to dance together. I went up on a hilltop and made a great big circle of rock. I wanted everybody to dance together, but they didn't. That's still the vision I would like to see manifest. After the Rainbow Gathering, I had a $100 Ford Fairlane XLT Galaxy, red with bucket seats. I joined a rainbow caravan to Spokane, Washington, to the World's Fair. On the way, we went to Zion National Park. 11 vehicles, 70 people. We freaked Zion Park out and they asked us to leave. We went on to Virgin River. Dominic was there, Medicine Story was there. Bear stole $40 from my dashboard and took off with Peter. One night on the caravan, we ate peyote and took a sweat. Then I shared my special dance with them. We took off to the north, and the caravan got divided into 2 groups of vehicles that traveled at the same rate of speed. One school bus had such a hard time, everybody had to get off in the middle of the night so the bus could go uphill. I was really impressed at the 2 rainbow ladies who could get up and cook dinner for 65 in the middle of the night. We got to Provo, Utah, and stopped to look for jobs picking cherries. That was one of the first mornings I ever met Michael. We made a fruit salad together. Paul Raindrop got a lot of flour and honey and baking things for free. He found a Mormon youth center called The Gathering Place, where we made a lot of bread and cookies and rolls. That night Michael and me took a walk, one of the nicest walks I ever took in my whole life. I fell in love with him. Then 15 or 20 of us went together to an orchard to pick cherries for a couple of days. I was so in love with Michael, all I wanted was to be with him and not 15 or 20 rainbow cherry pickers. So I took off with Michael and Raindrop in my red car to pick up my teepee in Ellensburg, Washington. It took us 3 weeks to get there. We got there and my teepee got ripped off. It just blew me away. Michael said, "I'm going back east. Do you want to come?" I said, "Sure." I'd never been hitchhiking. That's how we went. We hitched from Washington State to New York. It took us 2 weeks. Every night we stayed in a different person's home and Michael would cook for them with food we got from supermarket dumpsters. We went barefoot with just 2 blankets and no money. We were reading 7 Arrows, and we read from it to everybody we met. It was a real introduction to America for me. It was such a builder of faith. That was where I gave Michael the name Buffalo for being a giveaway animal. We stopped in Chicago and saw my grandmother. Then we went on. I got pregnant. I think I conceived my son Crowboy under a freeway bridge near Washington, D.C. When we got to New York, we saw my mother. Michael Buffalo was beginning to grow dreadlocks. To my mother, he was a nigger. The last words she said to me when we left were, "If you ever want to come back to normal society, I'll send you a ticket." "You have to have a ticket to get in?" I asked. "An airplane ticket," she said. We met Michael Buffalo's parents. They are Italian, nice people, very loyal to their family. Then we went to the Florida Keys, and then we met Raindrop in Arizona on Halloween, the second full moon in October. We spent a month in northern Arizona by Winslow. Then we spent a real mellow month in a canyon near Mexico, living really simply and communally. Then we went to Washington to have my son Yarrow, who is also called Crowboy. I consider Washington to be one of my old homes. We made our first teepee together as a family. We went to the barter fair and wanted to come south again. When Crowboy was 7 months old, we headed south in a VW bus that averaged about 25 miles an hour all the way. We lived at a place called the Desert House near Tucson. The only people when we were first there were Chamai and her son Antelope. In about 2.5 months, it grew to about 50 people on 2 acres. We had to haul in every drop of water we used. During the Christmas season, they had 3 really good peyote meetings. They painted peyote birds on Chamai's teepee. Then we had one more peyote meeting. Raindrop went to get the peyote and got in debt to do it, and he had never been in debt in his life. It was his ego trip that he could get lots of peyote. Michael Buffalo was sick, but Raindrop insisted he should go with him. When Michael Buffalo got back, he was almost dead, so he had to go to bed, so neither of us took part. Phil Coyote was the roadman. They made a rattle and a water drum and some other things for the ceremony, and during the ceremony they all broke. Even the peyote road that they drew on the ground got scattered. People got sick at the meeting. Phil Coyote told me he thought the spirit of Quanah Parker appeared at the meeting and said, "Don't mess with peyote because you're not ready for it yet." That morning, as they came out of the teepee, the cops showed up. They were very polite, but they told everybody to get in a circle to see these wanted posters. When I saw the cops, I went running to the teepee to see if there was any more peyote. There was a basket with hundreds of buttons. I said, "Come on, Chamai and Songfeather, we gotta bury it." So we ran into the desert with police planes circling overhead, and we scraped a hole with our hands under a kala plant and buried the peyote. Then we looked up and saw a cop car. The cops only found one button. I knew the federal narcs would be back, so I gave the buttons to Phil Coyote to bury, and he gave them to a brother named Toe. The federal narcs did come back that day. The only people they did want to speak to was Chamai and me. They asked us what we were doing in the desert. I said Chamai was helping me take an enema. One of the cops said, "Did you shit out this?" and held out a big peyote button. I said, "No, I didn't," and all the cops and everyone laughed. They said, "Where's the peyote?" And I said I didn't know. He said, "Look, I'm a federal narcotics agent. Now I know what federal narcs look like. They are the cleanest people I have ever seen." And I said, "I still don't know where the peyote is." So they wanted us to go back to the teepee to look at our ID. Michael Buffalo had some peyote drying there. I was praying to the Archangel Michael to confuse them. Michael Buffalo remembers reading that the soldiers hated to enter Indian teepees because they considered them to be smoky holes. So he put a whole ton of wood on the fire, and the cops didn't come in because it was too smoky, and they left. People started coming out of the desert where they had been hiding. We put all the kids on one of our school buses, and everyone was out of there in 4 hours. Nobody wanted us in Tucson. When Dennis and Donna hitched into Tucson, the cops stopped them and told them to get out. We went on a dumpster run, and supposedly Squeaky Me, our dog, bit a guard there. So here we were in hiding in a friend's house in Tucson, and cops came. Sunlight, our friend, wouldn't let them in. I was paranoid. Michael Buffalo was super sick in bed. The cops didn't have a warrant. Next day, 6 of us left Tucson and went to Gardner Canyon. Songfeather negotiated for us to make a big sign for a lady who had a store in Patagonia, Arizona, for $300. That was enough for us to get up north to Washington. We went to the first all-one family healing gathering at Eden, Hot Springs Equinox, 1976. There was a lot of controversy there between dog owners and non-doggers. Stephen Gold, who ran Eden, was so anti-dog that Sunlight's dog, who was a very mellow dog, ran up and bit him. Ba and Hines saw a rainbow going into a supermarket dumpster. They found 2 cases of eggs. When they took them to the Eden Healing Gathering and made fried potatoes and eggs for everybody, some people there freaked. We did the cleanup at the Healing Gathering. We went to Hopi Land. We went to Bakavi, where Raindrop had lived for 2 years off and on. It's the non-traditional village with electricity across the road from Hotavila, the traditional village where Grandfather David lives, which has no electricity. We were there for Easter. The first dance we went to was at Walpi in First Mesa on Palm Sunday. They had clowns who really singled us out. Michael Buffalo had dreadlocks, and the clowns grabbed him and put a robe on him and said, "Now you be Jesus and tell us what to do." We heard that the Hopi young people didn't want to plant corn anymore, so we went to ask the old people if they needed any help planting. We saw all these deserted cornfields that were no longer planted, and we asked people if we could plant our crops there, and they said, "You'll have to ask the clan, because almost any piece of land you see belongs to the clans." And I had to wear a bra and a skirt, and I wanted my freedom, so we left after 2 weeks to look for more land to live on. I realized I wanted to be around hippies. They're my people, those free, dirty, and loving people. We split up in Hopi Land. Hines and Songfeather stayed in Arizona. Dennis and Donna went east. Michael Buffalo and me went to Washington and blew up 2 VW engines getting there. We were led to this place called Flowering Tree. It was an old medicine lake. The only thing left of the lake was a spring and very fertile land. There was an old Indian village there. There were about 50 mounds in 4 lines. We lived there for 2 years and attracted about 30 people. My son, Dancing Johnny, was born there. It was a very happy place. It made our family so strong to have a piece of land to live on. We were caretakers. To live with a group of people steady does amazing things for you. The land was owned by 5 different people. 2 of them had built a dome on the land. I think they thought of it as a vacation and retirement place, but they couldn't give up their city ways. 3 of the owners really dug us, but the other two watched our population grow and got alarmed. They put us off. They said it was to give the land a rest, but it was also the Great Spirit spreading us to share the enormous strength we had gained. We prayed for the place we wanted. We sent out some scouts, and they scouted a place called God's Garden in Idaho. We moved there with horses and donkeys. We traded a school bus for the land. We made a really beautiful 2-acre garden, but the vibration wasn't right. It was forest land and we were desert people. You see, the flowering tree was in open country, sagebrush, scattered pine, occasional cactus. The horse people in the family couldn't ride horses around God's garden because the forest was so thick. Besides that, there were questions about land ownership and land payments. Spring was so late there, so we couldn't garden and we got really discouraged. We said, let's go south. We went to the 1978 Oregon Rainbow Gathering. So Michael Buffalo and I and Patty and Blackjack went to Lorien and then to Chico, where we harvested thousands of pounds of figs. Then we traveled to Utah with Earthworm and Van. Earthworm got hepatitis real bad. We went to Eden and spread the hepatitis around. Since then, we've spent the winter in Arizona. We got moved to New Mexico in the springtime to make a garden, an answer to our prayers to finally plant a field of blue corn. We wanted to plant food for the 1979 Arizona gathering, but we didn't get our garden spot soon enough to. Our land is near the old Pueblo ruins near Reserve, New Mexico. Like the Bible prophecies, rebuild the waste places and inhabit the ruins again. As of early 1990, Moonstone and Michael Buffalo are still with the Flowering Tree Group in Washington State.